American runners use both imperial and metric to keep track of running distance. You'd think we could just get by with keeping track of miles, since our entire infrastructure is based around the mile. You know, that nice round number of 5,280 feet, is that it? Well, at least it's the main way I keep track of how far I run. However, most races are in kilometers, with 5Ks and 10Ks being the most common. So most runners have it memorized that a 5K is 3.1 miles and a 10K is double that at 6.2. And don't get the two units mixed up. One time I was running a trail 10K that had signs every kilometer letting you know what distance you've run so far. Naturally, there were 9 of these signs and then the finish. But in my tired state, I thought that they were counting miles, and I just needed to see 6.2 of these signs and I'd be done. Boy, was I upset when I realized I was not near the finish at all, and it was only in fact halfway.
Oh, what? I was counting miles there, not kilometers.
Okay, 2 types of units for distance. That's not that bad. We do that for a lot of things here in the States. For example, I weigh myself in pounds, but weigh my coffee out in grams. But running has a third unit of distance. Miles, kilometers, and marathons. 26.2 miles, 42.2 kilometers. But you only have to worry about marathons if you're training for one, right? Nope. The next most common race distance after 5Ks and 10Ks is a half marathon. 13.1 miles, a race that I'm training for right now, which according to my legs is way too long of a distance to be half of anything. I'm sure you've all heard the story of why we have a third running distance unit. Some guy possibly ran from Marathon to Athens in 490 BC and then died. There's debate on how far he actually ran, if this actually happened at all, but he certainly didn't run 26.2 miles. Most people think he ran either 25 or 22 miles depending on the route he took. The first modern Olympic Games thought it would be a cool idea to dig up this old story and have it be a race people ran, choosing a route that ended up at about 40 kilometers or 24.85 miles. Each Olympic marathon after that chose their own route and ended up having a slightly different distance, usually around 40 kilometers. 40K, what a nice round number. A 40K race makes sense. We have 5Ks and 10Ks, let's make a half marathon 20K and a full marathon 40K. That would be nice and lovely and it would all make sense. It is pretty reasonable that the first modern Olympic marathon races had different distances. You can spend hours on Map My Run or some other run mapping tool trying to map out the exact distance you need without getting stranded far away from your home with sore legs. Seriously, if you need a good puzzle, go to Map My Run right now and make a 5-mile route that starts and ends at your house without doubling back. Bonus points if you run through something relatively scenic instead of just the side of busy roads. Anyway, back to the marathon. The year is 1908 and the Olympics are to be held in London. There have been 4 modern Olympicses, each with a marathon race roughly 40 kilometers long. Queen Alexandra requested that the race where the peasants run very, very far start at Windsor Castle and end at the Olympic Stadium. So they planned a route that was a nice even 26 miles long. But that wasn't enough. The Queen wanted the race to finish directly in front of her viewing box. So the race was extended by 385 yards to finish right in front of her. There's definitely something ironic about forcing the common man to run further so you can see them better. So the full race length was 26 miles and 385 yards. For those of you good at math, that equates to the modern 26.2187. It's so bad. But don't worry, it's 1921 and the International Amateur Athletic Federation is going to sort all of this out. It's their job to standardize how long a marathon is. They have all of these distances to choose from. May I make a suggestion? Go with 40 kilometers. It was the distance they used in the first modern Olympic Games. It's easy to remember and measure. It's 4 times as long as the 10K, half of it would be a 20K. I don't need a calculator, there are no decimal places involved. And we can stick to the 2 units we already have. And they chose the British 26 miles and 385 yards. Why? Well, it was a bloody good race, old chap. Yeah, the 1912 Olympic marathon race was so good, we're gonna make everyone run the exact arbitrary distance for the rest of time. Great. Fantastic. Lovely. Okay, fine. Should we call it something more clear, like the Great British Runoff? Or make up a whole new British-sounding word like quaff? Or maybe call it the Queen's Race? No, we're still gonna call it a marathon, even though it doesn't really have anything to do with the dude dying on his way from Marathon to Athens. And when anyone asks, we're still gonna point to that story, even though the distances have nothing to do with each other? Cool, great, sick. Just making sure. So that's right, thanks to the lovely folks at the IAAF, we now have 3 different units. Choose your race distance, 5K, 10K, 10 mile, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathon? Wait, putting the word ultra in front of the word marathon isn't really a good descriptor. A half marathon makes sense, just divided in half. Ultra isn't a math term, I can't multiply 1 marathon times 1 ultra. And in fact, an ultra marathon isn't even one set distance. It's kind of a catch-all term for a very long race. 50K, 50 mile, 100K, 100 mile, or really whatever ludicrous distance the race director wants. So then why do we call it an ultra marathon if it's not proportional to a marathon at all? Like, why associate it to a completely different race? Right, and that's just distance. Let's talk about speed. When you measure the speed of anything, how do you say it? Do you say my car travels at X hours per mile? Because that's what runners do. We measure pace, which in America land is minutes per mile, or time divided by a distance. This is definitely backwards from any other way to measure speed. But I'm not too mad about this one, it kinda makes sense. You can multiply how many miles you're running by your pace, and that'll tell you how long it'll take. But that really only works if the race is measured in miles. How long will it take for me to finish a 10K if I'm running at a pace of 9 minutes and 20 seconds? But runners know what good times are for different race lengths. Like someone will say, oh, I ran a half marathon in sub 2 hours, and I have to stop and do some math before responding. Oh, that's actually pretty good. For a while, my go-to pace was 10 minutes per mile, which for math purposes is the best pace, since it's just 1 mile per 10 minutes. Oh, it's a 6-mile race? Okay, I'll see you in an hour. I've gotten a bit faster since then, and I'm annoyed at the math required now. And then you go online and other people are talking about running 6 minutes per kilometer, and you're like, that sounds fast, but I honestly have no idea. Side note, I'm so happy that there's only one standard of time. Like, how bad would it be if we had imperial or metric minutes? Ugh. It's also confusing if you ever want to know what speed you're running at instead of pace. Like in miles per hour, how fast are you running? Which isn't that useful, but when you're stuck in traffic, it is cool to look down at your speedometer and be like, I can run faster than this. There's just a lot of math and numbers in running, a lot more than I expected. I didn't even talk about things like cadence, heart rate, or elevation gain. But the nice thing about running is that all that math is optional. You can just ignore all the numbers and go out for a nice run. Or you can do all that math as you run as a means of distracting yourself from how in pain you are. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to my half-great British runoff training.